And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership, CoalitionRadio.us. There's a new selection, Liberty News, which will bring you updates from all the organizations we follow: FEE, AIER, the Goldwater Group, the ACLU, the 1889 Institute, the FIRE, advocating for free speech on campuses everywhere. And we hope to have them on the air in the coming weeks. Now that we've entered the college season, the silly season, we've got an article up there right now talking about how a university decided to reintroduce their free speech zones. Now, if you're saying, why would Pat Ford be against a free speech zone? Let me tell you, the whole point of a free speech zone is that's the one spot you get to have free speech. College campuses are all about free speech, wherever, whenever, at what time, however that occurs. So the notion that we would somehow zone free speech is disgusting. So check us out on thecoalitionradio.us. Listen, joining us from the wilds of Rhode Island, and I mean the wilds, at an undisclosed location in the bunker, is our good friend Amy Gardner. Amy, welcome back to the Coalition.
Thanks. Thank you for having me on.
Right. So one of the things we've talked about, and we're going to work out the details on this, is either a bi-monthly or a monthly segment where you come on and introduce and talk about issues surrounding medical freedom. So medical freedom, if you will, and that's a term I use. Maybe you can elaborate on that. What is medical freedom to you?
Medical freedom is choosing your choice of care without being regulated into one particular avenue. And so there's different ways that it happens, and sometimes it's the insurance only covering one option when there's more than one treatment option, and sometimes it's a doctor. We have a lot of medical kidnapping in this country, where one doctor feels that a treatment is what should be done, and when a parent tries to get a second opinion, that doctor chooses to get Child Protective Services involved and take medical custody of the child because the parent isn't following their protocol. And unfortunately, it actually successfully happens more often than it should, where the doctor is able to take medical custody before a parent even has the ability to get a second opinion and another treatment option. So there is...
That's astonishing. Well, let me reflect on that for a second. So what you're saying is, if you've got a situation where there's a divorce or a legal separation, and the court has gone through extensive work to establish how child care is to be handled, the level of participation by each of the two parties in the failed relationship. There are patterns, beliefs, track records, which in many cases indicate no controversy whatsoever. Are you telling me that a doctor can essentially use a claim of a diagnosis to interfere with the parental-child relationship?
Yes, it happens quite a lot in this country. Actually, there was a case of a teenager in Connecticut about 4 years ago,
right,
where a 17-year-old, so almost an adult herself, was diagnosed with a form of cancer, and her mother had decided that chemotherapy was not the avenue that they were going to take, and the doctor did not agree with opting out of chemotherapy, and the doctor went and successfully got medical custody and medical jurisdiction, and that 17-year-old was forced to comply with chemotherapy.
Despite both the child and the parent's wishes. And I'm not asking you to be a lawyer here, but how difficult is that medical process, or is the assumption by the court systems in this country such that the doctor's knowledge, trumps all, for lack of a better term?
Yeah, basically, we have come to a point in this country where a lot of medical professionals have, for lack of a better terminology, a God complex.
Yep.
And there's a lot of society that go along with that, where they don't second guess and they really do look at medical professionals as though they're gods, but they're just as much human as anybody else. And every single piece of information that a doctor has access to is accessible to every single human being on the internet. The only thing that they can do is make prescriptions, order labs, etc., that we can't do. But as far as studies and research and data, every single one of us has access to the same level of information that they do. And yet there is this perception that them going to medical school has allowed them to access this entirely different level of data and information that nobody else can access, and so they must know this extensive amount more than anybody else, and that's just not the reality of it. We can all find all the information.
That's astonishing. That's an area I'd like to dive into in the future with you, because it's whether and we'll talk about the format in the next week or two, because whether it be you coming in here and having your own guest in studio, it's become clear to me that the events of the last few years, whether it be the bad database bill, the warrantless searches of your prescription medical database, the very notion that we have a prescription medical database, the exponential increase, the explosion in the number of inoculations under current law, the lack of oversight, if you will, of the efficacy and the safety of these inoculations. Medical privacy, to me, is the Wild West of American government. Am I stretching it by saying at this point the government can view your life and your relationships with your family in any manner in which they do so, and just essentially justify it by some perversion of medicine?
Oh no, definitely it's getting worse and worse, and the more and more they're pushing for these medical records and online databases being all electronic and all of this, it's just interconnecting so many things that are basically dangerous precedents, because somebody at some point is going to make an assumption or an assertion based on a file without meeting you, without knowing you, and it's a slippery slope. And especially with for instance, immunizations, and a lot of people feel that if you need a medical exemption, you can get one and you deserve one. A lot of people don't realize that it's actually pretty difficult to get a medical exemption, even when you have an allergic reaction to the previous immunization, and even when you have a seizure to an immunization and there's not a way to know which ingredient, because there's so many in each immunization, you don't necessarily know which ingredient enacted the seizure for that particular person. So a medical exemption should be issued for all further vaccinations until you could see otherwise that there's a particular ingredient you should be avoiding. Unfortunately, you will only get a medical exemption for the one vaccination that gave you the seizure, even though multiple ingredients are duplicated throughout vaccinations. So the next one could give you a seizure that could be extremely damaging. And a lot of people don't realize that getting a medical exemption is not so simple. And even when you should get one and you do have a reaction, it's not necessarily issued to you. So that's a serious problem within the medical realm also, and also takes away the option of medical freedom with going to school, because a parent is faced with the choice, if their child has been injured by one particular vaccination and they are not able to actually get a medical exemption like they rightfully should be able to, now they are faced with a difficulty of putting their child in school and needing to fill out a religious exemption. As the state of Rhode Island, that's their only other option. And so then they're faced with, do I fill out this religious exemption, or do I get another vaccination and take the chance of my child having another reaction because I can't get the medical exemption that I should be able to get? So again, all of that, that's not freedom of choice. That's not the ability for you to decide what is best for the health of your child. It's under coercion, and it's not set up in a way that lets you do what is best for your family.
So this is what I'm confused by, and this is what I'll have to phrase as a rhetorical question, because I have a feeling you and I are going to be agreeing on it. In our first segment tonight, we had a young woman who is an activist in the sex worker community, and we both agreed that there is a less than subtle form of irony in a state where we just gave extra legal protection for the right to choose, all right, where we
Yep.
enabled a fairly extreme extension of abortion rights based on the domain a woman has over her own body. Yet this is a state that will not allow you to take drugs. This is a state which will not allow you to engage in the sale of sex. And now we're hearing from you, this is a state which will not allow you to control your body in terms of your level of vaccination.
Correct.
Do you find irony there?
It should be body autonomy, like, all around. You should have control over your body for medical and beyond, because it is your body. And yet they are piecemealing laws so that some of them you have control over your body, and others the government has control over your body. And really all that does is make it so that even though this particular expansion of the abortion law in Rhode Island, it's a double-edged sword, because there's so many other pieces of the health policies and laws that actually remove your rights and put the government in control, that one particular piece could stay there as the only piece you can actually choose, or it could be slowly dwindled away also because of setting precedents that the government actually chooses for you what is best for you.
Wow. Scary stuff. Absolutely scary.
Yeah.
It
definitely is.
And given we became friends a couple years ago, and it seems like that the pace, the acceleration of the surrender, if you will, of one's body to the government is increasing exponentially. That there is this constant assault of new laws being, again, whack-a-mole, legislative whack-a-mole here in Rhode Island. Which laws do you choose to try and respond to? Which one are you just hopelessly outgunned, if you will? Is there any one group of people that, and I'm not trying to play conspiracy theorist here, although I saw a great meme on the internet today that says, at what point in time, I forget the term they use, instead of taking shots at people who we would have regarded as, and I'll use the word kooks or conspiracy theorists a few years ago, do we start giving them respect for which they were right and consider them to be conspiracy realists? I love that term, conspiracy realists. So, and I thought about it. That's one of those things, where someone smarter than me came up with that little meme. But there's certainly an element of truth in that, isn't there?
The conspiracy realist point, and
Yeah.
is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, really, if you look at history, it's the people that stuck out and decided to question and think critically for themselves and said, "Hey, wait a minute, these pieces don't add up." And of course, there is the group mentality, which is actually human nature, but the group mentality and following the crowd would, you alienate the one that critically thinks and questions the group mentality. But history shows us that the majority of the time, that one that stuck out and questioned the roles and the way things were happening was either completely right or at least partially right.
Wow. Whew. So, is there any one group that's, that you can point to? Or is it too far into the shadows that's coordinating all this? I mean, for example, on the prescription medical database bill / bad database bill, were they the same cast of characters? Was it law enforcement in conjunction with the Attorney General's office? Who is it? Where is this seemingly typhoon of legislation coming from?
Oof. Yeah, that's pretty deep. But I'm gonna be a little bit more general and say that the pharmaceutical industry is pretty much the largest lobbying industry, and they have control over organizations like the CDC and the FDA because there's a revolving door. The head of the CDC took a job and transferred to the head of the vaccination department at Merck as soon as she authorized the HPV vaccine from the CDC. So she helped push the vaccine through,
Right.
and did that. And then no sooner was that completed, she conveniently became the head of the vaccination department at Merck, the same company that makes the HPV vaccine. And that's just one example. So this is a consistent revolving door between the organizations, making it so that lining pockets is a probable motivation and something that is important to note. And the CDC is also not, it's endorsed by the government, but it is its own entity. It has its own nonprofit. It has its own things that are extremely suspicious.
I hear you. I mean,
Yeah.
What's next on the horizon? Is there anything that we need to start talking about now in anticipation of the next legislative session? What have they missed, or what are they gearing up to quote the Eagles or misquote the Eagles? What are they gathering their steely knives for now?
What's the next thing? Is that what you said?
Yeah. What's on the horizon? What indignity are they going to perpetuate upon us next, do you think?
Well, in Rhode Island, the next thing on the horizon is removing the religious exemption to vaccinations for school entry, which is straight up discrimination. You're actually discriminating against a group of religious people. In our Rhode Island state constitution specifically states that you have those rights to belief, and that your rights to belief should not stop you from your job and etc. It's right in our Constitution. But the Rhode Island Department of Health told a class of Brown University students, medical students, that toured the building. They toured, and one day while there, one of the staff members told the students that they will be working in Rhode Island to remove the religious exemption in the future, so that you do not have the option for any reason, including your religious beliefs,
Right.
to opt out of vaccination. Now, in Rhode Island, even with our religious exemptions, which are your strongly held personal belief system, and that's the definition, and nobody has a right to question you further about it because your religion is your privacy.
Right.
We have some of the highest vaccination rates in the country with people taking the religious exemption still. We only have approximately a 4% of people using the religious exemption. So they're literally going to discriminate against a small percentage of people, regardless of the high vaccination rates in Rhode Island. So therefore, this is not about public health whatsoever.
Right. Well, like I said, I look forward to incorporating you into the show. We'll be working on that over the next couple of weeks. I think it'd be a combination of you joining me, but also giving you the opportunity to bring guests on who, can raise the bar on the conversation. Something that you do all the time, but I think it's clear, given this prolonged, relentless attack on ultimately what I define as our civil liberties, that nothing less than bringing every cannon to bear on the state needs to happen, and it needs to happen as soon as possible.
Yes, definitely. It's time to shout from the rooftops, especially informed consent and making sure that people know their options, because there's so many situations where they are given the impression they don't have an option, and that's not true, and people need to know. And so I'm excited to start working on the show with you and getting the needed information out there to the public so they can be properly informed.
Because it's become clear to me, Ms. Gardner, that outside of you and a handful of activists who work alongside with you and with you, that unless we can somehow raise this to the level of the ACLU, there ain't nobody else left. The Department of Health isn't looking out for us. The state government isn't looking out for us. Gina ain't looking out for us. It's not a particularly rosy picture right now. If we don't reassert ourselves and actually
yes,
at some point,
definitely. And even last Saturday, just a week ago, there was a rally co-hosted by Health Choice Rhode Island and Rhode Islanders Against Mandated HPV for medical freedom and your choice and your health choice. And we had a rally on Saturday, and we had approximately 45-50 people in attendance with signs, and we marched in front of Providence Place Mall, and we got our message out, and we had information for anybody that wanted to ask questions. It was a great day, and the people coming together and shouting and standing up that we deserve these rights and people need to know about it. And so healthchoiceri.org and Health Choice Rhode Island on Facebook, and then My Rights RI on Twitter, and people can connect with us for sure.
Well, thank you so very much. I know you're with your family tonight, so thanks for carving out part of the evening. Listen, enjoy some of the best of what Rhode Island has to offer. Send us pictures, and it's when you get back from vacation, it's time to get back to work, isn't it?
Yes, for sure. Time to hit the ground running.
There you go. Looking forward to it. Amy Gardner, of course, I believe to be the premier healthcare choice, healthcare civil libertarian, the premier healthcare advisor, watcher, guarder, warrior princess, if you will, in Rhode Island. She's been doing it for years. Again, another example of a Rhode Islander doing something simply because it's the right thing to do. It can be argued that of all the activists I've had on my show tonight, none of them will ever, other than satisfaction for a job well done and and the frustration of somehow having to face seemingly insurmountable challenges, that no personal benefit will come to them if, in fact, the state doesn't find ways to challenge them on other personal levels because of their activism. They're to be saluted, thanked, supported, but most importantly, joined by additional Rhode Islanders who hopefully will wake up and start to get exactly what's at stake. So, Amy, thank you so very, very much.
Thank you for having me on. Have a great night.
All right, buddy. Well, that's it for tonight. I am going to talk just a minute or two about an area that's been troubling me, twofold. Number one, schools. For those of you still listening or listen to this in the near future, we continue to circle the drain, if you will, here in Providence, Rhode Island, and at all large Rhode Island public schools. The performance is abysmal. The conditions in which students in many cities, not all, but many cities, are being forced to study in are abominable. And yet, no one's been fired. Heads haven't rolled. The very same people who brought us to this horrific moment in history still remain largely in power. How is that possible? Public education has failed us at every level in this state. As I often say, students are an unnecessary convenience, if you will, for a educational industrial complex that's taken over the state. A necessary inconvenience in the sense that they bring the money, they bring the funding. The only hope for education in this state is competition. Free market competition. People say, we don't have the schools right now. I get that. The libertarian in me wants to just shut them all down right now, have people take off a year or two. Hell, in most of these schools, it wouldn't matter. Providence schools, most of them, it doesn't matter whether you show up or not. We're simply warehousing children there. And we're warehousing them in terrible conditions. We wouldn't put an animal in some of the places that we put our children in Rhode Island and Providence public schools. The free market will generate competition in the form of privately run schools, which, because of the need for competition and the need to compete for students, will have to excel. And those schools are not one size fits all. Given the opportunity, with the availability of extensive capital on the sidelines waiting for investments like this, combined with a population that will be enabled through the use of, for the time being, emphasis the time being, savings accounts, educational savings accounts, plenty of organizations will pop up and provide education at affordable rates, catering to the special needs of a wide variety of children. Happens all the time with every other industry. Will take a little bit longer, probably because of the interference of the state. Yes, it will. Does that mean it can't happen? Absolutely can happen. And quite frankly, the schools have failed at such a rate, there is no other choice at this point. We enter the school system here, the school year, if you will, same curriculum, same teachers. We're paying attention now, so for a while you'll start to see, a halo effect from that. But over time, in the absence of significant reforms, we'll just fall back to where we were if we don't change. It's happened with pensions, it's happened with healthcare, it'll happen with education. We need to give choice to parents. Money collected by taxes should follow the student to wherever those parents choose to bring them. In no way, shape, or form should government interfere with the primacy of the parents in making educational and, in the spirit of Amy's recent visit, healthcare choices for their children. It can get a hell of a lot better, a hell of a lot faster, if we simply accept the fact that we no longer need to accept this failed notion of this social contract, this social compact that is just between government and the population. I didn't sign it. I want no part of it. I'm blessed because my children have made it through school now. Gambling. Well, we had sports gambling today, or yesterday, or whenever. We continue to develop channels with which government competes with the private sector for the entertainment dollar and the overall tax dollar of the individual. And we wonder why there's no money left in the economy to support free enterprise and private business. And as a result, we wonder why the tax base continues to be decimated. Recently, whether it be cannabis, whether it be gaming, sports betting, government has decided to adopt a market behavior which was, prior to the inception of these laws, illegal. People went to jail. People are in jail for now for engaging in these behaviors. For some reason, because government has chosen to do so, it's okay now, as long as you do it with the government. That needs to end. The private sector should be able to participate in marketing games of chance, sports betting, just like the government. The notion that we grant the government a monopoly and then again don't understand why private businesses are failing because they cannot compete against the subsidized businesses of the government is baffling to me. That needs to happen. If government can market gaming and games of chance, then the private sector should be allowed to as well. We've got government right now investing in getting monopolies in social media. How about we start investigating the monopolies in government? That's going to be it for tonight. A little bit of an early close, much probably to the relief of Joe, erstwhile hardest working producer in showbiz. He gets to listen to me for 3 hours straight. Holy cow. If you have a chance, we put up a lot of the video from our trip down to New Mexico and Mexico. Take a moment, listen to that with an open mind. Work past the rhetoric, the generalizations, the cliches about people seeking a new life in this country. End this foolishness that somehow we criticize parents in Central and Latin America for carrying their children across horrific landscapes to bring them to freedom. If it was an American mother doing it, we'd celebrate her. It's time to engage in the free exchange of people, ideas, and commerce to allow people the right of travel when and to where they wish, to engage in commerce unblocked, if you will, by government, who draws up arbitrary lines, calls them nations, and says, if you're not on this side of the line, you have no rights here in America. Natural-born rights, which should always trump governmental rights. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage-born free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the Go Local Live Broadcast Center, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. Please follow us there. On the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. Please follow us there. And also the PO Taxpayer. The letter P, the letter O, Taxpayer, one word. That's my personal Twitter. And of course, the mothership at coalitionradio.us. We're under the Liberty News. We're going to pump up information from all of the partners who are kind enough to spend time with us here on the air so that we can continue to spread the word, amplify their message, and hopefully introduce more than a little bit of common sense into our relationship with our government. We'll see you next Friday.